Stolen Brains by Captain S.P. Meek. Part 1. "I hope, Carnes," said Dr. Bird, "that we get good fishing."
"Good fishing? Will you please tell me what you are talking about?"
"I am talking about fishing, old dear. Have you seen the evening paper?"
"No. What's that got to do with it?"
Dr. Bird tossed across the table a copy of the Washington Post, folded so as to bring uppermost an item on page 3. Carnes saw his picture staring at him from the center of the page.
"What the dickens?"
he exclaimed as he bent over the sheet. With growing astonishment, he read that Operative Carnes of the United States Secret Service had collapsed at his desk that afternoon and had been rushed to Walter Reed Hospital, where the trouble had been diagnosed as a nervous breakdown caused by overwork. There followed a guarded statement from Admiral Clay, the president's personal physician, who had been called into conference by Army authorities. The admiral stated that the chief of the Washington district was in no immediate danger, but that a prolonged rest was necessary. The paper gave a glowing tribute to the detective's life and work, and stated that he had been given sick leave for an indefinite period, and that he was leaving at once for the fishing lodge of his friend, Dr. Bird of the Bureau of Standards, at Squaw Pan Lake, Maine. Dr. Bird, the article concluded, would accompany and care for his stricken friend. Carnes laid aside the paper with a gasp.
"Do you know what all this means?"
Carnes demanded. "It means, Carnesy, old dear, that the fishing at Squaw Pan Lake should be good right now, and that I feel the need of accurate information on the subject. I didn't want to go alone, so I engineered this outrage on the government, and I am taking you along for company. For the love of Mike, look sick from now on until we're clear of Washington. We leave tonight. I already have our tickets and reservations, and all you have to do is collect your tackle and pack your bag for a month or two in the woods, and meet me at Penzie Station at 6 tonight."
"And yet there are some people who say there is no Santa Claus," mused Carnes. "If I had really broken down from overwork, I would probably have had my pay docked for the time I was absent. But a man with official pull in this man's government wants to go fishing, and presto! The wheels move, and the way is clear. Doctor, I'll meet you as directed."
"Good enough," said Dr. Bird. "By the way, Carnes," he went on as the operative opened the door, "bring your pistol."
Carnes whirled about at the words. "Are we going on a case?" he asked.
"That remains to be seen," replied the doctor, enigmatically. "At all events, bring your pistol. In answer to any questions, we are going fishing. In point of fact, we are, with ourselves as bait. If you have a little time to spare this afternoon, you might drop around to the office of the Post and get them to show you all the amnesia cases they have had stories on during the past 3 months. They will be interesting reading. No more questions now, old dear. We'll have lots of time to talk things over while we are in the Maine woods." Late the next evening, they left the Bangor and Aroostook train at Masardis and found a Ford truck waiting for them. Over a rough trail, they were driven for 15 miles, winding up at a log cabin, which the doctor announced was his. The truck deposited their belongings and jounced away, and Dr. Bird led the way to the cabin, which proved to be unlocked. He pushed open the door and entered, followed by Carnes. The operative glanced at the occupants of the cabin and started back in surprise. Seated at the table were 2 figures. The smaller of the 2 had his back to the entrance, but the larger was facing him. He rose as they entered, and Carnes rubbed his eyes and reeled weakly against the wall. Before him stood a replica of Dr. Bird. There was the same 6'2" of bone and muscle, the same beetling brows, and the same craggy chin and high forehead surmounted by a shock of unruly black hair. In face and figure, the stranger was a replica of the famous scientist, until he glanced at their hands. Dr. Bird's hands were long and slim with tapering fingers, the hands of a thinker and an artist, despite the acid stains, which disfigured them but could not hide their beauty. The hands of his double were stained as were Dr. Bird's, but they were short and thick and bespoke more the man of action than the man of thought. The second figure arose and faced them, and again Carnes received a shock. While the likeness was not so striking, there was no doubt that the second man would have readily passed for Carnes himself in a dim light, or at least at a little distance. Dr. Bird burst into laughter at the detective's puzzled face. "Carnes," he said, "shake yourself together, and then shake hands with Major Trowbridge of the Coast Artillery Corps. It has been said by some people that we favor one another."
"I'm glad to meet you, Major," said Carnes. "The resemblance is positively uncanny. But for your hands, I would have trouble telling you two apart." The Major glanced down at his stubby fingers.
"It is unfortunate, but it can't be helped," he said. "Dr. Bird, this is Corporal Askins of my command. He is not as good a second to Mr. Carnes as I am to you, but you said it was less important." "The likeliness is plenty good enough," replied the doctor. "He will probably not be subjected to as close a scrutiny as you will. Did you have any trouble in getting here? Unobserved?" "None at all, Doctor. Lieutenant Maynard found a good landing field within half a mile of here, as you said he would, and he has his Douglas camouflaged and is standing by. When do you expect trouble?" "I have no idea. It may come tonight, or it may come later. Personally, I hope that it comes later so that we can get in a few days of fishing before anything happens."
"What do you expect to happen, Doctor?" demanded Carnes. "Every time I have asked you anything, you told me to wait until we were in the Maine woods. And now we are there. I read up everything that I could find on amnesia victims during the past 3 months, but it didn't throw much light on the matter to me."
"How many cases did you find, Carnes?"
16. There may have been lots more, but I couldn't find any others in the post records. Of course, unless the victim were a local man or of some prominence, it wouldn't appear."
"You got most of them at that. Did any points of similarity strike you as you read them?"
"None, except all were prominent men, and all of them mental workers of high caliber. That didn't appear peculiar because it is the man of high mentality who is most apt to crack."
"Undoubtedly. There were some points of similarity which you missed. Where did the attacks take place?"
"Why, one was at... Thunder, Doctor! I did miss something. Every case, as nearly as I can recall, happened at some summer camp or other resort where they were on vacation."
"Correct. One other point. At what time of day did they occur?"
"In the morning, as well as I can remember. That point didn't register."
"They were all discovered in the morning, Carnes, which means that the actual loss of memory occurred during the night. Further, every case has happened within a circle with a diameter of 300 miles. We are near the northern edge of that circle."
Carnes checked up on his memory rapidly. "You're right, Doctor," he cried. "Do you think—"
"Once in a while," replied Dr. Bird dryly, "I think enough to know the futility of guessed hazard without complete data. We are now located within the limits of the amnesia belt, and we are here to find out what did happen, if anything, and not to make wild guesses about it. You have the tent set up for us, Major." "Yes, Doctor. About 30 yards from the cabin, and hidden so well that you could pass it a dozen times a day without suspecting its existence. The gas masks and other equipment which you sent to Fort Banks are in it. In that case, we had better dispense with your company as soon as we have eaten a bite and retire to it. On second thought, we will eat in it. Carnes, will you go to our downy couches at once and leave our substitutes in possession of the cabin? I trust, gentlemen, that things come out all right and that you are in no danger."
Major Trowbridge shrugged his heavy shoulders.
"It is as the gods will,"
he said sententiously.
"It is merely a matter of duty to me, you know, and, thank God, I have no family to mourn if anything goes wrong. Neither has Corporal Askins. Well, good luck at any rate. Will you guide Carnes to the tent and then return here, and I'll join him?"
Huddled up in the tiny concealed tent, Dr. Bird handed Carnes a haversack on a web strap.
"This is a gas mask," he said. "Put it on your neck and keep it ready for instant use. I have one on, and one of us must wear a mask continually while we are here. We'll change off every hour. If the gas used is lethane, as I suspect, we should be able to detect it before it gets too concentrated, but some other gas might be used, and we must take no chances. Now, look here." With the aid of a flashlight, he showed Carnes a piece of apparatus which had been set up in the tent. It consisted of 2 telescopic barrels, one fitted with an eyepiece, and the other, which was at a wide angle to the first, with an objective glass. Between the two was a covered round disc from which projected a short tube fitted with a projecting lens. This tube was parallel to the telescopic barrel containing the objective lens. "This is a new thing which I have developed, and it is getting its first practical test tonight," he said. "It is a gas detector. It works on the principle of the spectroscope, with modifications. From this projector goes out a beam of invisible light, and the reflections are gathered and are thrown through a prism of the eyepiece. While a spectroscope requires that the substance which it examines be incandescent and throw out visible light rays in order to show the typical spectral lines, this device catches the invisible ultraviolet on fluorescent screen and analyzes it spectroscopically. Whoever has the mask on must continually search the sky with it and look for the 3 bright lines which characterize lethane, one at 230, one at 240, and the third at 670 on the illuminated scale. If you see any bright lines in those regions, or any other lines that are not continually present, call my attention to it at once. I'll watch for the first hour." At the end of an hour, Dr. Bird removed his mask with a sigh of relief, and Carnes took his place at the spectroscope. For half an hour, he moved the glass about, and then spoke in a guarded tone. "I don't see any of the lines you told me to look for," he said. "But in the southwest, I get a wide band at 310 and 2 lines at about 520. Dr. Bird advanced toward the instrument, but before he reached it, Carnes gave an exclamation. "There they are, Doctor!" he cried. Dr. Bird sniffed the air. A faint Swedish odor became apparent, and he reached for his gas mask. Slowly, his hands drooped, and Carnes grasped him and drew the mask over his face. Dr. Bird railed slightly and feebly drew a bottle from his pocket and sniffed it. In another instant, he was shouldering Carnes aside and staring through the spectroscope. Carnes watched him for an instant, and then a low, whirring noise attracted his attention, and he looked up. Silently, he caught the doctor's arm in a vice-like grip and pointed. Hovering above the cabin was a silvery globe, faintly luminous in the moonlight. From its top rose a faint cloud of vapor which circled around the globe and descended towards the earth. The globe hovered like a giant hummingbird above the cabin, and Carnes barely stifled an exclamation. The door of the cabin opened, and Major Trowbridge, walking stiffly and like a man in a dream, appeared. Slowly, he advanced for 10 yards and stood motionless. The globe moved over him, and the bottom unfolded like a lily. 2 long arms shot silently down and grasped the motionless figure and drew him up into the heart of the globe. The petals refolded, and silently as a dream, the globe shot upward and disappeared. "Gad, they lost no time," commented Dr. Bird. "Come on, Carnes, run for your life. Or rather, for Trowbridge's life." "No, you idiot, leave your gas mask on. I'll take the spectroscope. It'll be all we need." Followed by the panting Carnes, Dr. Bird sped through the night along an almost invisible path. For half a mile he kept up a headlong pace, until Carnes could feel his heart pounding as though it would burst from his ribs. The pair debouched from the trees into a glade a few acres in extent, and Dr. Bird paused and whistled softly. An answering whistle came from a few yards away, and a figure rose in the darkness as they approached. "Maynard?" called Dr. Bird. "Good enough. I was afraid that you might not have kept your gas mask on."
"My orders were to keep it on, sir,"
replied the lieutenant in muffled tones through his gas mask.
"But my mechanic did not obey orders. He passed out cold without warning about 15 minutes ago."
"Where is your ship?"
"Right over here, sir."
"We'll take off at once. Your craft is equipped with a bird silencer?"
"Yes, sir."
"Come on, Carnes. We're going to follow that globe. Take the front cockpit alone, Maynard. Carnes and I will get in the rear pit with the spec and guide you. You can take off your gas mask at an elevation of 1,000 feet. You have packed the chutes, haven't you?"
"In the rear pit, Doctor."
"Put one on, Carnes, and climb in. I've got to get this spec set up before he gets too high." The Douglas equipped the bird silencer,
took the air noiselessly and rapidly gained elevation under the urging of the pilot. Dr. Bird clamped the gas-detecting spectroscope on the front of his cockpit and peered through it.
"Southwest, at about 1,000 more elevation," he directed.
"Right," replied the pilot as he turned the nose of his plane in the indicated direction and began to climb. For an hour and a half, the plane flew noiselessly through the night. "Bald Mountain," said the pilot, pointing. "The Canadian border is only a few miles away."
"If they've crossed the border, we're sunk," replied the doctor. "The trail leads straight ahead."
For a few minutes they continued their flight towards the Canadian border, and then Dr. Bird spoke.
"Swing south," he directed, "and drop 1,000 feet and come back."
The pilot executed the maneuver, and Dr. Bird peered over the edge of the plane and directed the spectroscope towards the ground.
"Half a mile east," he said, "and drop another 1,000. Carnes, get ready to jump when I give the word."
"Oh, Lord," groaned Carnes as he fumbled for the ripcord of his parachute. "Suppose this thing doesn't open?"
"They'll slide you between 2 barn doors for a coffin and bury you that way," said Bird, grimly. "You know your orders, Maynard?"
"Yes, sir. When you drop, I am to land at the nearest town. It will be Lowell, and I'll get in touch with the commandant of the Portsmouth Navy Yard if possible. If I get him, I am to tell him my location and wait for the arrival of reinforcements. If I fail to get him on the telephone, I am to deliver a sealed packet which I carry to the nearest United States Marshal. When reinforcements arrive, either from the Navy Yard or from the Marshal, I am to guide them towards the spot where I dropped you and remain, as nearly as I can judge, 2 miles away until I get further signal or orders from you."
"That's right. We'll be over the edge in another minute. Are you ready, Carnes?"
"Oh, yes. I'm ready, Doctor, if I have to risk my precious life in this contraption."
"Then jump!"
End of Part 1 of Stolen Brains by Captain S.P. Meek. Narrated by Miranda Colleen Johnson. This is the end of Part 1 of 4.